Is honey just bee vomit? And is fruit just the same as high fructose corn syrup? Let's dig into these arguments and find out the truth with a little bit of science today. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I see in the carnivore community where I don't really think we're putting our best foot forward. And that would mainly be a couple of arguments around some contentious topics. That this would be really the topic of honey and the topic of fruit. Okay? So what is the debate on honey and fruit anyways? Well, it often centers around the following ideas and questions. And the first question is honey or fruit the same as sugar? The argument goes something like this. Fructose, as in high fructose corn syrup, and sugar, sucrose, as in fructose plus glucose bonded together, have been linked to metabolic diseases. Well, honey contains fructose and glucose for that matter. Fruit also contains fructose. Therefore, honey and fruit are bad for you and will cause metabolic disease. The other popular argument is honey is just bee vomit. Let's tackle this second one first. This essentially boils down to a mixture of guilt by association and an ad hominem argument. The argument is basically making the analogy that vomit is disgusting, which it is. Therefore, bee vomit is disgusting, and by consequence, anyone who eats honey is disgusting. So you can see why this is a guilt by association / personal attack. Now, honey is either a nectar or a honeydew. That's a secretion of a plant or a fruit that is indeed regurgitated by a bee. It's then acted on by an enzyme and dehydrated over a period of time in a beehive. Now, is that disgusting? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a weird thing to eat, but humans, we eat all sorts of weird things. Beef tongue, oxtail, pig's feet, chicken feet, duck head, organs, fish eggs. The list goes on and on. And all of those foods that I just listed are actually carnivore foods. But some people, even some carnivores, would find those to be gross or disgusting. You know, we even eat some carnivore foods raw. Oysters, sushi, some people eat raw eggs. This essentially boils down to an argument about a personal preference. And it's really just an idiotic thing to debate or even use as a counter to any kind of science-based arguments. Now, look, I love Dr. Berry, and I listen and watch to a lot of his videos. I also reference him all the time in my practice, but the bee vomit rebuttal to honey is not exactly his best argument. And I don't believe it's our best argument from the carnivore community when someone, especially someone new, asks about it. That's why when we do this, I don't think we're putting our best argument or our best foot forward. It makes us seem dogmatic, ideological, and to be quite honest, a little bit irrational and over-emotional about a topic that I think we can approach from a science standpoint to get to a satisfactory answer about whether or not a particular individual should consume it or not. Next, let's cover this false equivalency argument about fructose and fruit and honey. First, I just sort of want to highlight my thought process on these types of arguments where we take a whole food, even a food that was ancestral food that was ancestrally available and that we know we ate, and we compare it with a modern processed food, just because they both contain a single shared ingredient. So you might see a question about fruit in a carnivore group, and invariably someone will reply with, well, fruit contains fructose, and as a result, I guess we're supposed to equate this with fruit is bad for us. So I like to kind of go through the following exercise where we really just think about this, and we don't even need to get too far into science. We can just think about it logically. A can of cola, which is probably going to be the single biggest source of any dose of fructose that someone would receive, and also it's in a liquid form with nothing to sort of mediate it, contains about 30 grams of fructose from high fructose corn syrup. Now, fruit also does contain fructose, and honey as well. The question is, can we and should we equate fruit then, which has fructose, in a natural food matrix with a can of soda, which contains high fructose corn syrup, which is a highly refined, industrially processed product that's derived from grains, actually. We know ancestrally that we did eat fruit. We didn't have access to it at all times, so it was something that was available seasonably and in moderation. So that begs the question, just how much fruit is the equivalent of 30 grams of fructose then? Well, if we look at, for example, 1 cup of strawberries, 1 cup of strawberries has 3.8 grams of fructose, which means you need to eat about 8 cups of whole strawberries to consume an equal amount of fructose as 1 can of soda. Well, that's pretty eye-opening. Still, does that mean they're equal or equivalent? Is 8 cups of strawberries really the equivalent of a can of soda? The problem with this argument is essentially just how unrealistic it is. As a species, it's virtually impossible that we would have ever been able to sit down and eat 8 cups of strawberries in an ancestral setting. I'm not sure most people could even do this now, versus, say, the number of people who can drink a can of soda in 15 minutes. And when you realize that some people drink multiple cans of sodas a day, then this argument equating anything containing fructose with high fructose corn syrup just becomes patently absurd because of the amount of fruit that you would need to consume to equal that many cans of soda. The other thing that we have to consider is that all the fiber, the water, and even the phytochemicals in fruit or a strawberry definitely impact not just how much you can physically eat, they will also affect satiety and how quickly a food is digested. So I have a study here that I'm going to put up. This is titled Postprandial Glucose, Insulin, and Free Fatty Acid Response to Sucrose Consumed with Black Currants and Lingonberries in Healthy Women. Okay? Basically, the study was they took a mixture of fruit, lingonberries and black currants, and they added sugar to it, sucrose. Then they also had a control, which was just the sugar in water, and this was consumed by healthy women, and then they monitored the impact on their blood sugar and their insulin. So the results of this are pretty interesting. Let me read the results here. In comparison with sucrose alone, ingestion of sucrose with whole berries resulted in reduced glucose and insulin concentrations during the first 30 minutes, and a slower decline during the second hour, and a significantly improved glycemic profile. Basically, this is saying that something that was in the whole berries is impacting the rate at which the body is processing, or I guess absorbing, the sugar. And in fact, it didn't just slow down the absorption, it slowed down the digestion. So instead of having this super huge peak, you had a decreased peak of blood sugar, and then it slowly tapered off. The other part of the results is it says that the berries prevented sucrose-induced late postprandial hypoglycemic response and the compensatory free fatty acid rebound. But what are they talking about there? So what happens if you consume like a refined sugar, sucrose, something like that, some glucose, is you will get a very, very high blood sugar spike, especially if this sucrose or glucose is not bound to anything that will slow down the digestion of it. Consuming these things as a liquid is generally about the fastest digestion or absorption you're going to see. So that's really what you would want to avoid the most, is consuming these type of refined sugars as a beverage. That's really the worst way to have them. When you have that really sharp spike in blood sugar, your body kind of freaks out and says, whoa, we got to get a handle on this, and we have to release a lot of insulin right now. Otherwise, our blood sugar is going to go too high. We can have some negative health consequences from this. Your body is just reacting and trying to keep you alive. This is just really essentially a normal reaction. It's an overreaction, but it is a normal reaction by your body, which is just trying to keep you alive in the short term. So all it sees is, hey, blood sugar is going through the roof really quickly. We need to dump a bunch of insulin into the bloodstream. Pancreas goes into overdrive, dumps a bunch of insulin, will invariably dump too much insulin, which then leads to the roller coaster, which is your blood sugar drops really low. This is because of the amount of insulin that's released. Then your body sees, oh, blood sugar is too low. And it kind of freaks out a little bit again. You're at the bottom of the dip in blood sugar. You're at the other end of the roller coaster. So now your body will say, we need to stimulate some hunger. We need to eat something. We need to get a handle on this blood sugar and level it out. Your body might release ghrelin that tells you you're hungry. Usually that will drive you to seek some kind of carbohydrates to kind of level that blood sugar out. We saw, though, in this study that when people had a sugary drink versus a sugary drink with the berries mixed in, that those berries somehow slowed down the digestion. Was it the fiber? Was it the phytochemicals? Was it something else? It's not really clear from this study. So let's look at a second study. The second study says polyphenols and phenolic acids from strawberry and apple decrease glucose uptake and transport by human intestinal cells. Substantial inhibition on both uptake and transport was observed using extracts from both strawberry and apple. So when we look at both these studies together, we see that it wasn't just the fiber, but it was also the polyphenols. One of the things that they looked at in the first study and noted is that they had similar effects for both whole berries that had been, blended or pureed, as they did for berry nectars, which that would be, they were crushed and they just extracted the juice, so they didn't have the fiber. So it shows that it's not just maybe the fiber, but there's also something to do with the phytochemicals polyphenols, whatever you want to call them, that are in the fruit that also can slow down digestion. What does all this mean? Like, at the end of the day, it means we simply cannot equate a whole, ancestrally available food with a modern processed food simply because they contain a single shared ingredient. And indeed, I think this is a really wrong strategy to take, because it's kind of the approach that the other side will take, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, where they will hone in on a single item or a study, observational study that looked at hamburgers, for example, and say, this study looked at people who ate hamburgers regularly and then maybe found some association with cancer. And even though the association may be weak, they'll look at this and go, see, meat causes cancer. So they're taking a single ingredient from this hamburger and saying this meat causes cancer. So there's two fallacies there. One, in that they're looking at a single ingredient and they're not really controlling for the other factors or the other ingredients. Two is that it's not an actual interventional study. It's just observation and association, which it just shows us association, not causation. These are the kinds of things that we kind of expect from some groups that espouse a certain way of eating or lifestyle, because we see it a lot. It's not, however, how I think that people in the carnivore community should be conducting themselves. We might as well just start debating whether salt will kill us because it contains chloride, and so does bleach, right? In the end, the chemical structure of components matters. You could also take natural fats versus trans fats. Natural trans fats versus the artificially hydrogenated trans fats. They're just slightly different, but at the end of the day, it makes all the difference to our bodies. Like, let's not ignore the reality here and try and chase dogma and make absurd arguments. I mean, if you want to eat a strawberry, or if you don't, I don't care. I'm not saying eat fruit. I'm not saying eat honey. I am just saying don't engage in the kind of arguments like false equivalency, or even worse, the guilt by association and personal attack. We can actually look at the science. I think it's easy to say, well, if you're metabolically compromised, is honey something that's healthy for you, right? I don't think there's any studies that clearly indicate that honey is safe for someone who is metabolically compromised. That is an area where really the studies, in my opinion, are lacking. And I do plan to tackle the subject of honey in another video and specifically show a lot of the actual science around fructose and honey, some studies that are directly comparing them. I think that will be extremely enlightening. I know maybe this comes off as a bit preachy. I'm not saying that everybody in the carnivore community does this. I am saying that it happens sometimes. And honestly, I feel like we should kind of police ourselves, right? When someone says, oh, well, don't eat fruit because it has fructose, and maybe you just respond back to say, there's a lot of studies that say that fructose, is not digested the same way as fructose that's associated with fruit. And it's okay to admit that and still say, even though that may be the case, well, it's probably not healthy for someone who is maybe struggling with obesity, has a lot of visceral fat, or even has some metabolic syndrome that they need to heal up first. So I hope you enjoyed today's content. I know it's a little different. Again, sorry if it comes off preachy, but just a path that I see that maybe some people in the carnivore community are taking, and I honestly disagree with it. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Put your comments down below and tell me what you think of these kinds of arguments, and Really, how should the carnivore community proceed in this area? Hope you enjoyed today's content, and I will see you next time. So if you enjoyed today's information, I provide information just like this to my clients to help improve energy, burn fat, and build muscle through an ancestral lifestyle and diet. My program doesn't involve gimmicks like bars and shakes, counting points, tracking macros, or even spending hours and hours doing cardio in the gym. Now, I've not only used this program to help clients improve well-being and health, but I also used it as a part of my own personal transformation. So if you're looking for an easy, intuitive way of eating and simple lifestyle adjustments to improve your well-being, then click on the link in the description below to book your free no obligation discovery call today.